The floor is yours.
Well, welcome. Thank you for that great introduction. I will say, and I said this in my earlier session, this is my favorite conference to present at. Just this group and the personalities and the passion and the heart that this group has is just inspirational. And it just, to be asked to come back and present is just an honor. So thank you so much. For those of you who have not met me, I am Amy Wassman. I am the Whole Child Program Director at Saginaw ISD currently, but I am moving over to MDE the end of next month. I will be the SEL school consultant. I'm so excited to really do that work and focus on social emotional learning and building resilience in not only our students, but our staff, because I am a huge proponent of, if we don't take care of our adults in our buildings, we can no way take care of our students. And so we need you all in the classrooms coming in every day, so you can be those role models and supports for our students. So I feel like while I love doing SEL with students, I really, really feel that working with our adult population is so important when we build those supports. So we'll get going, and I want this to be interactive and conversational. So do not feel like you are interrupting. If you unmute and ask a question, I am here for you to go in whatever direction you need me to go. I have PowerPoint slides, but if you need me to go down a different direction, ask. I am more than willing to go down the path you need me to go. So with that, we will get started. Oh, by the way, any of you watching a football game this weekend? Just if you want to put in the chat just for something fun, like who's going to win. I might be wearing green, but I'm pretty sure I know who's going to win, and it may not be green. So we'll see. I don't know. My daughter is wanting to be a vet. She's 14, and so she really wants to go to Michigan State. So we're a house divided. The guys want U of M to win, and the girls want State to win. So super fun. So, and just an extra thought, thank goodness you're here and not in an elementary school building today. Because you know what today is? Halloween parties. So yay, that is, there's a lot of blue here. We need some more green. Okay, anyway, let's have some fun today talking about this. What I really want to do is we're going to hit a little bit on why adult resilience is so important. I'm not going to go in like a great detail, because guess what? I think you already know that. What I really want you to leave with today are some strategies, just strategies that you can implement in the school setting. So while most of this session is going to look at what can be done with a team in a school, the adult team in the school, I will devote some time to talk about what we need to do personally that we can do on our own time. But I really want to honor how busy and how full your plates are. So these sessions really are the strategies are really focused on ways that we can work on this and build up within the school environment. So we'll hit on both, but that's kind of where the focus is today. So I was at a SEL conference. MDE did an SEL building bridges, breaking down silos SEL conference yesterday and Wednesday. And I think the big quote that that really hit home for me is, we cannot demand what we don't deliver. So when we are expecting our students to practice those SEL competencies, we also need to make sure that we're practicing those as well. And as we're encouraging our students to build up those competencies, we need to devote some time as a school staff to also develop those competencies and strengthen and support staff in that development. And so that is really important. This quote was from 1960, but it still rings true today. Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. So I'm going to start off with a question. Have any of you gotten ready for work? Like you're on time, you're ready. Oh, shoot. You know what? I did this the last time. Catherine was in this meeting. I forgot to share my screen again. I don't even know. It's because I have two monitors and I can see everybody. So I just assume that you can see me, but you can't. Here we go. Let me share this. There. Now it's not just good. Thank you. I said I wasn't going to do this the second time and I did it a second time. So, but basically, how many of you have gotten ready for work and you're rocking it. You're going to be there on time. And then life happens. Your dog pukes on the carpet right before you walk out the door. You're taking your kid to daycare and you realize he only has one shoe on. Might be some real life situations here. That have totally, maybe you don't feel well. Maybe you didn't sleep very well the night before. And so you wake up and you're tired and you walk into work. Well, you might be coming in hot because you might be late, which adds a whole nother level of stress. But then you walk into your classroom or you walk into your office and you know you're not at that regulated, normal, emotional level that you're used to. How does that play out at the start of your day? What happens?
You want answers? You want
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh-oh.
You're muted, Elizabeth. Unmute again, please.
Okay. I mean,
Thank
you
you.
really want us to answer that question?
Sure. How are you feeling when you're on those days?
Well, on those days, when I open the door and get in the classroom and I see the girl's reaction like, yay, she's here. That's it. I'm a better woman. I'm changed. I'm changed.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say for me, it makes me impatient. It makes me impatient if I've already had like all these things to overcome when I get here. Because I like my mornings to be able to ease into my morning, have my quiet time. And if I don't get that, it makes me very impatient.
Right. And you have students coming in who are used to the patient you, right? And that might not be what they get if we don't practice some regulation and get to where we need to be. I noticed that at home too. If I had a bad day at work or something happened and I come home and what normally isn't a big deal in my household all of a sudden is a big deal to me, then my kids are looking at me like, which mom came home today? Like, this isn't the normal mom, right? And so then we sometimes have to backtrack, we have to apologize. And so it's so important that we figure out some ways that we can kind of build that resilience. How can we get back to that regulation phase? And Elizabeth, I loved your statement of the kids see me and they're excited, and that's my regulation. That's what gets me back to that peace, right? That level emotion. And so we need to find that. And I also feel like we need to make sure that as a school system, as a building, we're building each other up. And so some of these statements are things that maybe are more administrative led. Some are things that we can do as individuals and as a team of staff. So keep that in mind as well. So when we're finding our power, when we're building those habits that kind of cultivate resilience, it really helps if we can find that power. What do we own? What do we have control over? And then what can we do with that? The first habit is really knowing yourself and understanding what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and why you're feeling. Seems easy, right? Like that's the piece. Seems easy, right? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's easier to know ourselves when we're calm, right? We don't want to be going through this process when we're upset or we're having a bad day. But how do I see myself? And we talked about this in the earlier session about our kids sometimes having negative self thoughts, right? Like I'm not worthy, I'm not important enough, or what I'm feeling is wrong. Adults can have those feelings too. And so how do we work on internalizing our self-awareness, identifying who am I, what are my beliefs, what are those things that I am pretty set on, that there's no deterring me, but then what are some things where I'm willing to listen to what other people have to say and get ideas. I need to know what I want and what I need, and I need to make sure my values are clear. And sometimes where that gets murky is when our values may not match what our state legislators or the people making the rules of education reflect, right? Like whenever there's kind of that conflict of what my values are with the group that I'm working with, when those don't meet, that can cause some chaos. And so how do we work through that? And that's why it's so important to know what your own values are. And I'm willing to brave the discomfort of self-reflection. So part of self-awareness is identifying what are my strengths, but also where are my areas of improvement. Like I know for me, patience is something that I am constantly working on. I always talk about self-care and everything about I'm a work in progress. I am a work in progress around patience. I'm not always a patient person. And so I need to know that in order to own it, and also to understand how that impacts my behaviors and my decisions that I make. And then by knowing that, it helps me make the choices that I need to make. So if I'm not being patient, I need to know that maybe I don't make a decision right away until I'm calmed back down, right? And so it's really understanding what are your strengths, what are you a work in progress in, and that you're working to build. And I think that's key. And I'm going to say these strategies work with youth too. And so keep that in mind as we're moving through things. The biggest thing is being able to identify and know our emotions. And so I always talk about name that tune. So what feeling are you feeling? It's feelings are just that. They're feelings. They're not, we talked about feelings being wrong. Feelings are not wrong. What we feel is very real and very much okay. What we talk about, especially when we're talking with students and with youth, is sometimes the behaviors we have from those feelings aren't okay. What we do because we're feeling that way may not be okay, but our feelings are our feelings, and there's nothing wrong with that. The other thing is we tend to, when there's a feeling we don't like, we tend to push it aside. We tend to ignore it. We tend to, or try to ignore it. We try to push it down or forget about it. And that doesn't work. We need to live in that feeling. We're not going to overcome that feeling if we try to bury it. It's only going to come back to kind of bother us and hurt us in the end. So live in it. You don't have to live in it forever, but be present in that feeling. And then from there, you can strategize what we need to do differently. But you have to live in that. And like I said earlier, there's no feeling or emotion that's wrong. It's just what we're feeling. And it's all based on our values and our life experiences and everything else that kind of makes us human. And those feelings are just part of that.
Amy, there are a couple of notes here that I'd like to kind of bring to the forefront, but there's something I also wanted to add to this one, if it's okay, as also an attendee. I think what you just said, I actually really, really love that, because I think that helped me in coping with my own like personal struggles, is living in that emotion, but letting the people around you know. And it's okay. Sometimes we put our big girls pants because we have to always be composed. We have to be super moms, super everything. And I think sometimes being not okay is absolutely okay. And I think, like you said, it's work in progress. This is one of the best things that actually, it was my son that had taught me to be unokay. And he said, Mom, it's okay not to always be, composed, to be strong, to be happy. It's okay to feel these emotions. And I really want everybody that's listening today, for what you said. I mean, like I said, it's just something amazing that we sometimes want to hide that feeling. But somebody said something here that I'm so happy that they said it. They find themselves always apologizing when they're having a bad day. And I think that just kind of, it's a segue to what you just said. We apologize when we're not superhuman, when we're not superwoman or superman, super whatever. We always apologize for that. So her comment is spot on, is that we find ourselves apologizing instead of letting ourselves go really down to the barrel. That's what I think is the only way, is up. And
Yes.
I actually, that is my defense mechanism. When I'm sad, I have to let myself be super sad, because the only way is only up. So this is fantastic. I think this is also personal, but that person saying this about the apology, spot on. So keep those comments coming, because we're all learning from this. And it is just, that's how we know it's okay. It's a community of this. We don't have to always be perfect, because we're not.
We're not. And I think social media hasn't helped that, because you go on social media and people just post all the positives, and they don't. I so appreciate people who are like keeping it real. And I feel like you don't have to necessarily air your dirty laundry on social media, but you can talk about having a bad day, and how do we normalize that? Not every day is going to be perfect. Not every day is going to go the way we want it to go. And before working within the school systems, I was a substance abuse treatment therapist. And what I saw so often that hits along these lines is people sometimes have to hit rock bottom for them to see a different way. And so I feel like that's with the feelings. You have to sit in that feeling before you can see a different way, or a different way to maybe handle that experience. Or but at the same time, a red flag would be when you can't get out of that feeling for a long period of time. You can sit in it, but if it goes a long time and you just can't get out of it, then that would be a red flag. Like, okay, I need some support. I need some help. But I also feel like our colleagues need to see us being real, and our students need to see us being real. And you said your family needs to see you be real, because again, it's all that imitation, right? From that quote, like they learn by watching us, not exactly what we say, but what we do and how we handle things. And so I think part of the message is our students and our youth need to see that we can have a bad day, and this is how we handle it. This is how we deal with it. I think that's so important too, because they need that modeling in that example, rather than just to say it, right? They need to see it in action. And so I've had so many of my teachers say on those crazy days, walking into their class saying, I'm having a rough day. I didn't sleep very well last night. And what they see is empathy and kindness from the students and supporting that teacher. And so I think that is just so key. The other piece is how do we tell empowering stories? And I'm going to preface this because I think I skipped over the slide because I totally missed it. Is this isn't about, I used to call you all superheroes, and I'm going to tell you why I stopped, because that's a lot of pressure on you all. And I meant it with the most sincerest reasoning. And what I came to realize is that can place extra burden and stress on educators. And so, we talked about earlier about emotions and that toxic positivity. I'm not here to sit there and go, you need to always see the glass is half full, because sometimes it's just not, it's empty. And that's okay. So I'm going to preface it with that. We're here to be real, and we're here to support you in the way that you need and to build that up, but also be realistic in that not always looking at things as glass half full is really the solution. And so when I talk about telling empowering stories, what I'm saying is sometimes we get so stuck, especially if we've been having a bad day, we get stuck in the negative. And the example that was given was a teacher or a principal came into a classroom and observed the teacher teaching. And afterwards, the teacher said, I am so sorry. That was just a horrible class. The students were out of control. I am just so sorry that's, because guess what? It's evaluation, right? Like you're thinking, oh man. And that principal said, but you know what I saw? It was loud, but it was loud because students were collaborating with one another. Students weren't off task, and when students did get off task, this is how you routed them back in. And so it's reframing the same experience, but looking at how do we see the good that happened in that day as well, and find that balance. So you have the power to reframe. The reality is our brains are hardwired to focus on the negative. So we have to be active in rewiring our brains to see the positive. I know for me, and this isn't to try to influence you at all in any of evaluations, but guess which ones I focus on the most? The negative ones, right? Because that's the focus. It doesn't matter if I have 80 positive evaluations, I'm going to look at that one or two that didn't like my presentation, right? And that's what I'm going to focus on. That's my go-to. And then I have to reframe and retell the story and look at everything else, because the reality is maybe those individuals were having a bad day too, or maybe they already knew this content and it didn't meet their needs, and that's okay. So we have that control over telling our story. And so I think while I don't want to dissuade the negatives, what I want to do is also look at what were the positives of what was going on. What were the positives of being an educator right now? Because, the reality is last year, y'all were superheroes, right? Like for once, everyone was giving you the accolades you so totally deserve. And then something switched. And now we're back into that system of that public entity questioning, are you doing enough? Yes, you are, and so I feel like this wave, we're in control of our story. And we also have to realize too, that we have a story together as a team within our building. So keeping that in mind, and while I might be able to see and reframe the story, my colleague may not be able to that day. And so how do we support each other in that work? Because we can't do this alone. A key piece too is how do we build community within our building or within our district? And the number one, when we look at the research of really what builds resilience in staff, it is connecting with colleagues. And so how do we create opportunities around building community that isn't necessarily adding more to your plate or after school hours kind of activities? It could be, but it doesn't have to be. So looking at, do we have adequate mentoring and coaching opportunities? What do we do with our new staff in our buildings who may not understand how things work yet, or maybe they're new first year teachers and they're overwhelmed and stressed, and you're like, it'll be okay, right? Like, how do you intentionally create those pairings or those groupings of maybe a tighter, smaller community within your building? And then how do you increase collaboration as a team? I've had some of my principals in my region really consider or rethinking staff meetings. And how do we use this time that is kind of dedicated towards staff meetings that sometimes are just updates that, quite honestly, could probably be in an email? How could you better utilize that time to allow for that community building? How can you maybe allow for professional development opportunities during that time? Or we brought in, best thing ever, so if you're all looking for a way to be a rock star in your building, is connect with a chiropractor in your community and see if they would be willing to come in during lunches for like 10-minute chair or 5-minute chair massages. They will often come in and do that free of charge in hopes of getting new clients later on. And it was great. Like, just 5 minutes, 10 minutes of getting a chair massage did wonders for staff, right? So what are some things that you can do in that time frame? PLCs. How many of you are lucky enough to have PLCs in your building and you get to participate in them? Professional learning communities. So I often work with health and PE teachers who are usually the only ones in their building that do that work, and they're usually by themselves. And so working with how do we build a community within and kind of support each other? How do you, and I love the idea of rethinking staff meetings, because guess what? It's not you doing something on your prep hour. It's not you staying after school. And I think it's just that it's showing that your time is valuable, because we already know your plates are overflowing. And so we don't necessarily want to add one more thing. So how can we take the structure of what we have and be more efficient in that support? If we do have to have staff meetings, how do we build in community building activities at the beginning or at the end of that? Do any of you do some activities that really kind of bring you together as a team and that you would like to share?
Question also, Amy, until somebody unmutes, to be like a segue into the same segment from John Dye from Detroit. She said, can you share strategies to build community and increase collaboration in the virtual environment as a result of the pandemic? But then there are two comments for, along the same way. One from Caitlin from Selfawareness Solutions. And I love what she said, because she said she often thinks of the phrase, the manager brings the weather, and how my actions/energy level can impact my staff in a way that has pushed me to feel the need to be upbeat and positive. This makes me rethink how I can communicate with my staff in a more holistic and honest way. And I wanted to shine a light on this comment, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes your boss, your manager, your supervisor, your director, whatever it is, they determine how your day is going to be. So thank you so much for sharing that. But I think the question is about strategies in the virtual world.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, yes, I'm trying to work with administrators to walk the talk, right? Because sometimes we may have conflicting information as far as like, okay, we're saying this is important, but the actions don't speak that. So how do we work through that? And so the other piece is what do we have control over? And so I think that piece is helpful too. And I do appreciate the authenticity. I think it's okay to be authentic with your staff when you don't have when you're not having a great day, right? Because what that does do is that builds that trust of when they're having a bad day, they don't have to paint a smile on their faces. How do we be present for our students and do all of that? But who's my go-to within my building that I can go to? And it's not a complaint session. I need to get this, I need to share this so I can move on. And so I think it's finding that balance, right? I love that idea of being more authentic with your staff. As far as virtual goes, it's doable. It's just a little more challenging, right? And I think some of the key pieces when you're building community, and I know it worked for me because I have staff and they were all home, is how do we connect via Zoom and have those opportunities to just be. It doesn't always have to be work focused, just like staff meetings don't always have to be work focused, but how do we build community? Simple things like I got during COVID, way more text messages from my colleagues saying, hey, I'm just checking in. How are you? Right? It doesn't take a ton of time to focus on how to build that community. Also, I think it's very important when I talk about that mentoring coaching during COVID or when we're virtual and we're not in person, to pair up or to group up and have have smaller subgroups within your school building and really be strategic in who those pairings are, so we can so they can be a check-in for one another and a support system for one another. And so it's a little bit harder, but still very much doable. I think with technology, it does make it a little bit easier to check in. It does make it sometimes a little bit more challenging to identify when someone's having more than just a bad day, right? When we look at that mental health piece, I think a lot gets passed by. And so I think in that sense, making sure that we're sometimes asking the tough questions. So when someone's been having a bad day for, 2 weeks straight, asking, how are you doing? Asking, are you depressed? Have you thought about suicide? I mean, asking those questions isn't going to like bring that idea into their heads. But what it does do is it does allow them to feel like they're being heard. And so it can be very powerful to ask that question if you're worried about someone. And I think that's key as well. Other strategies for virtual, when we look at staff meetings, if it is an update, instead of an email, maybe make it a video that you can record and then send out, and then your staff can look at it when they have time. But I think the issue is you don't get what I miss, because I'm still working at home, is I miss the hallway conversations or the doorway conversations. When you walk to the restroom or you walk to the lunch area and you pass by a colleague and you chat with them for 5 minutes in the hallway, right? Like that's what I miss. And that's what helps build that community. And so you have to structure hallway chats intentionally via Zoom, but sometimes it can be something as simple as, a text message or an email or a phone call, and say, we're gonna have a informal staff meeting right now, and we're not going to talk work, right? We're just going to check in on each other and see how we're doing.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. I see your hand raised.
Yeah. Sometimes when we had virtual teacher meetings, just a meeting that the boss scheduled, the bosses were kind enough to start the meeting with giving everybody a chance to talk about how they are feeling and what challenges they are. So that really, when you hear other teachers who are in the same boat talk about these things, that was powerful, I think. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I think it's so important to start meetings with where people are and asking how they're doing and not going right in. We don't do that with our students, right? We're checking in with them when they're walking through the door. We're seeing how they're doing. Um, we see someone that's a little less energetic than normal. We might check in with them on the side and see how they're doing. But we also know that we have to pause the work if our students aren't where they need to be, like ready to learn. And that goes the same with our staff. We have to make sure that we're checking in with them. And there's going to be certain things that we don't have control over. Someone said this week that, like, the only thing I have control over is how I respond to my feelings. That's it. I have no control over anyone else and how they're going to respond to me. And that's my mantra. That's what kind of gets me through is that gentle reminder. I can only control my actions and my reactions to my feelings and to others. And so thinking about that, but I love that starting off with just get to know you activities. You don't have to just ask what people did over summer in August when you come back for the first time. So, making sure that you're creating and embedding some relationship building strategies is really key during that time. So being realistic, when you focus on those bright spots, make sure that you're just being realistic of what's taking place. It's not rose-colored glasses all of the time. It's like, this was really bad, but here is a nugget of goodness that happened that gives me hope for tomorrow, right? That can help me get there. But the biggest thing is give yourselves grace. So often we're so giving of grace to others, and we are not so much to ourselves. And I think that's really the key too, is we need to make sure that we're giving ourselves grace. Ride the wave. Oh, go ahead. Yes, Elizabeth.
When you said make sure the students are okay, you reminded me of something very important, and I'm ashamed to say, like a few students in the back, they are women from Yemen, were talking and showing each other the cell phones and stuff. And my first reaction inside me was to get upset, like, how come they're interrupting? Then I told myself, now do the intelligent thing, Elizabeth, you can do it. So I told them, what's the matter? When I told them what's the matter, they opened up. One of the women's husband had been killed in Yemen. And that day they had found his murderer. And it was on social media, and that was what they were talking about. So I took a few minutes and let the students tell her, whatever they needed to say. So, I mean, yeah, I made sure they were okay. And then the lesson went on.
And I think that's key. And our students aren't the only ones with things going on in their personal lives. And I think that's what we also have to keep in mind, is that our educators also have lives where things might be going on and where your focus and energy isn't necessarily on school during that time. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I appreciate it. And I bet you the women also appreciated you giving them the time to process what they had just learned. So ride the wave of change. So again, this kind of goes back to what's within your circle of influence. What do you have control over? What don't you have control over? And, there's a famous Disney song about letting it go, right? Like, I won't go into song. My kids have told me that maybe I don't have a singer's voice. So, but I have a mantra. I actually have a bracelet that says, "It is what it is." Because I used to worry so much about things that were totally out of my control. And so I have learned to kind of tell myself that when I'm going through a situation that I have no control over and I'm worrying about. And so that just helps center me. How do you save energy and ride the wave? And I think about from an educational standpoint, what you have control over, what the state and legislators have control over, and what district admin have control over, right? And so finding that balance and riding the wave when you can. Because there's a lot that we would probably all change, but we don't all have that power to do that. And then celebrate and appreciate. And I think this is huge. And we talked about this in the last session about just recognition of great jobs and being kind and being supportive. And so I think celebrations and appreciation moments are huge in building that resilience. So celebrating those small victories and those wins, showing gratitude is huge. And just being there for each other, I think, is also huge. And so that growth piece, right? Because we're all going through this together at the same time with COVID and trying to find a normal, and it's not quite there yet as much as we were hoping for. And so how do we show the gratitude of the growth that we have made as we've been juggling the last 3 school years of just uncertainty, I think is huge. The other piece is taking care of yourself. So this is where I get to go into that self-care piece. And there's some basics. And I don't think that I can stress enough the need for sleep. Now, I am a work in progress because I have not gotten enough sleep this week because of everything that's going on. And I may tweak my slides until like the day of my presentation. So that's another work in progress for me, is just like making them and being okay with what they are. But I'm constantly adding things and tweaking things. So, but sleep can do wonders for your stress level, for your ability to regulate emotions. And just, it is the basic. And I know I'm telling you this and you're like, but I have all of these responsibilities. Like, you're asking me, I don't have enough hours in the day and you're asking me to like get an hour or 2 more sleep, right? Like, you're crazy, Amy. It can do wonders. And when you are well rested, you're more efficient in the work that you can get done. And so that would be my number one. The number 2 would be drinking water, drinking enough fluids, water, getting that water intake. Because here's the thing, when you're stressed, you have cortisol coursing through your body. That's that stress hormone. You need to get rid of that. You can't talk it out of your system. You can flush it out of your system with water. And so making sure you're hydrated is a huge thing that you can do. And I see everyone with like these ginormous water bottles. And I'm like, okay, like that's their water for the whole day. So that's pretty neat to see, but just making sure. And if it's too much, I'm all about baby steps. Can you add 1 cup of water to your day and find some success there? Because that also helps regulate emotions too. When you're dehydrated, it can really have harmful effects all over your body. And just move. I had exercise on here, but it's just movement. Just get up and move. And I'm all about a 2-for-1 sale in my personal life and in self-care. So guess what? Move with your kids. If you're a counselor and you have a one-on-one with a kid and luckily, knock on wood, it's not snowing in Michigan yet. It might next week. I don't know. But go do a walk and talk. First of all, kids are way more. I don't know about you, but like my kids will talk to me when we're driving in a car, when we're playing maybe video games or something, and we're not face to face. So getting up and moving will not only help the students that you're working with, but it also helps you. And getting that exercise will just feel good, right? So making sure that we're doing that piece. And then making sure that we're taking care of our mental health. So really looking at what systems are in place within your district, within your building that supports mental health. Look at your insurance. There's a lot of underutilized programs through a lot of school insurance companies, but making sure that we're utilizing that. And I think my biggest heartbreak is teachers not feeling that they can take a mental health day because of sub shortages, or because it's going to be frowned upon, or because there is a sub shortage and now I've just inconvenienced 5 of my colleagues because they just lost their prep and they're filling in for my class. So if you're worrying about taking a mental health day while you're taking a mental health day, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? So how do we create this culture that really supports that, not only your physical health, but your mental health as well? Any questions so far? Anything that's popped up? I'd recommend being present too. Sometimes we get so trapped and caught up with what's happened in the past or what we know is going on in the future that we forget to just be present and be in the moment. And if we can do that, it can alleviate a lot of worry in just being in that moment. So when we look at systems that work, that mentoring and coaching, counseling opportunities for staff, I don't know what you have going on, but usually there's some organizations within the community that support that. Flexibility in work hours. I had a principal who basically gave, you all have to stay after the buses leave or after the students leave so long. She basically gave her staff like 1 or 2 days a month where they could leave when the students left. No questions asked. You could have a doctor's appointment. You could go get coffee before your kids got home. You could do whatever you wanted, but that was the way of that principal honoring her staff and for the work that they're doing. And it did huge things for just building that morale and that resilience within the group. The key is if you offer these opportunities, don't force it. All you can do is offer. I think of these activities, these team building or resilience building activities, community building after hours. Well, I don't know about you, but like right now, my life after hours is totally consumed by my family, right? And their sport schedules. And so oftentimes I wouldn't be able to take part of an after hours SEL activity. So whatever we do that whether it's during the school day or after, it's an optional thing. We're not going to we're not forcing it, because we're going to have some staff that maybe don't feel comfortable yet doing that, and that's okay. And then just ways to integrate that SEL work into your everyday work environment. It doesn't have to be an additional thing. Whatever you're doing to take care of yourself would also benefit your students. So if it's a mindfulness activity, whether it's chair yoga, whether it's taking a walk outside and doing a walk and talk instead of having them turn in their seats and talk to each other, do it and do it with them. Everyone's going to benefit from that. We talked about the kindness tree already. If you're an administrator, being visible outside your office and just chatting with your staff, popping in. I had one principal who he would actually go in randomly and take over a class for like 10, 15 minutes and tell the teacher, like, go do whatever. You have 10, 15 minutes. If you want to go sit in the lounge and surf Facebook, you go right ahead. If you want to call a loved one or a best friend during that time, go ahead. And that little surprise built so much community and morale and connectedness with his staff. And then he goes, but Amy, I win because I get one-on-one with students that I don't get anymore. And so he saw it as winning and his staff saw it as winning, and everyone benefited from that. And so I thought that was just a really cool way to just honor and recognize staff. And then if you're doing any kind of activities, we do this with our kids, honor the pass or honor the come back to me. And, we can have our own zones of regulation type work when we have a staff meeting. Where's everyone at? Where's everyone at this morning? And then just that setting boundaries and expectations. I think that's what I'm going to end on, is setting after hours boundaries for you. You cannot be on 24/7. There was a time before smartphones and before laptops where everyone just understood that when we left for the day, we were done, unless you had our personal phone number, and then we would screen our calls. No, you would be there the next school day. And then we got away from that with technology. And so while I understand you may end your day before a lot of parents get out of work, I think it's also okay to say, here are my after work office hours for the week. And maybe it's just a little bit of time where you check email and you respond to parents, or you say, I will follow up with you in the morning. Like, and have that be part of your tagline and your email. Like, I will get back to you when I can. And I think that's so important, that we cannot recharge if we're tied to our phones for work email notifications 24/7. And so we really need to take a look at that. And I turned off my notifications on my phone. If you listened to me last year, I told you the story. It's like my favorite one to tell, but it really helped me build my own resilience and setting boundaries. And so my phone updated, didn't think anything of it. I had like no work email notifications, had personal email notifications coming through, but no work. And I'm like, wow, that's a really quiet night. And then I get to work the next morning and I have like 50 emails in my inbox since I left. And I was like, ooh, like what happened? Well, with my phone update, it turned off that notification. And I almost turned it on, and then I paused. And I said, were there any fires? Did I miss anything important from 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning? No. But you know what my kids saw? My kids saw me not on the phone responding, because they don't care if it's work or if it's me checking Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is. And so what they saw is me being present. And I feel like finding that balance, I always say, if there's a fire, they're not going to email you. They're going to call you. They're going to text you. They're never going to email you. So finding ways to create those boundaries so you can be present in your personal life is so key. And that will make you more present in your work life when you get to work. And I think we're like 3 minutes out, right, before we end. So are there any questions for me?
There are no more questions in the chat, but there was a conversation going. There's people commenting, and all the things they're saying was excellent. I think people found a lot of great tips. I think I did too. Believe me, you can hear these so many times, but I think you made it very real that we can always follow. I think you spoke as a mom, as you know, as somebody in this role and so on. So I think this was, I mean, I had a lot of great takeaways, or like reaffirmation of what I want. Like that notification, but I turned it off, but then I turned it back on. I swear to you, I just turned it off now. Because you're right. You're absolutely right. It is easier. You know what? Nothing's going to happen if you check your email in the morning. So yes, it was excellent. I think I've really enjoyed this so much. I definitely want to watch this again, you know, on my own. And I want to watch your session today. This was wonderful, Amy. Really, I've seen so many sessions, but this is, I think everybody that's here today will agree, this was phenomenal. Please, for everyone that attended today, go in, rank this session. I think Amy did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much, everyone. You've got a couple of minutes before lunch. Go enjoy, go kind of do whatever you need to do. Like Amy said, Amy, thank you so much for your time and this amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.